in the aftermath of a single precision U.S. airstrike. A highly classified bunker reportedly hosting senior command elements was completely neutralized, triggering an unprecedented shock within the Islamic Republic's inner circle. What now appears to be unfolding is a subtle but widening fracture at the highest tier of Iranian power, a system long perceived as opaque, disciplined, and largely impenetrable. But the most concerning element is not the strike itself, it's what followed. An internal power struggle is quietly taking shape at the top. High-level meetings, once considered the most secure environment, are now turning into fixed targets. Each gathering increasingly risks being struck with alarming precision. The consistency of actionable intelligence raises urgent questions about potential leaks or deep intelligence penetration. This leads to a stark and unsettling hypothesis. Have internal meetings effectively become targetable coordinates? Recent developments only deepen the sense of escalation. On April 6, President Donald Trump publicly praised an operation he claimed had eliminated multiple Iranian leaders. Posting strike footage on Truth Social as evidence, he asserted that several high-ranking figures accused of steering the country into strategic weakness had been taken out. The claims align with several Telegram channels reporting that over 50 senior Iranian officials were eliminated in a coordinated U.S.-Israel operation. However, Israel has swiftly denied any involvement, further clouding the true nature of the campaign. What's most puzzling is Tehran's response. Despite repeated strikes, high-level meetings continue at the same locations, with little sign of tactical adjustment. In an environment where a single misstep can be fatal, this pattern suggests more than rigidity. It hints at a system potentially losing internal control. The number 50 remains a critical unknown and a potentially decisive variable. There is no official confirmation whether this reflects casualties from a single strike or cumulative losses over the course of the conflict. Even amid conflicting reports, one trend is clear. The list of fallen senior leaders is growing, and the cause appears disturbingly consistent. Classified meetings are repeatedly compromised, pushing Iran's leadership into an unprecedented strategic dilemma. As centers of power are struck in rapid succession, suspicion begins to spread, disrupting decision-making at the highest levels. In its wake, a quiet form of political infighting emerges, factions competing not with weapons, but with survival strategies. One camp is pushing for a ceasefire, seeking to halt the spiral before it's too late. Opposing them are deeply entrenched elements, particularly those tied to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps who reject any negotiation. To them, compromise equals defeat. Amid this divide, a notable ceasefire signal has come from a familiar diplomatic figure. Mohammad Javad Zarif, Iran's foreign minister from 2013 to 2021, and now an advisor to President Masoud Pezeshkian, has indicated a willingness to de-escalate. The move reflects mounting internal pressure and a power struggle unfolding within the system itself. A recently surfaced document outlines a 6-point framework seen as a potential off-ramp, the first 12 detailing concessions Iran may offer, with the remainder defining reciprocal obligations from the United States. This is more than a diplomatic proposal. It reads like a blueprint to recalibrate the regional balance of power. On its side, Iran signals unprecedented concessions centered on renouncing nuclear weapons ambitions and capping uranium enrichment below 3.67%. Tehran also indicates readiness to ratify the IAEA Additional Protocol, enabling continuous monitoring, a move that would significantly expand international oversight. On the security front, Iran proposes guaranteeing freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz alongside Oman, while signaling openness to a permanent non-aggression pact with the United States. If implemented, these steps could fundamentally alter decades of entrenched tension. Beyond security guarantees, Iran points to joining a broader regional security framework, including the potential transfer of enriched uranium and related assets to a multinational consortium. It even raises the possibility of revisiting certain terrorism-related designations involving the United States, a highly contentious point. In parallel, Tehran outlines confidence-building measures, restoring diplomatic and consular channels, easing travel restrictions for U.S. citizens, and reopening its energy sector to international firms, including American companies. Notably, Iran suggests involving China, Russia, and regional states as guarantors of a non-aggression pact, shifting the arrangement from a bilateral deal to a multilateral security architecture. 12 points of concession. This is no longer routine diplomacy, but a survival trade-off. Yet the central question remains, is this genuine de-escalation or a calculated move in a larger game? As Iran's position comes into focus, the second half of the 6-point framework opens a far more contentious front, what Tehran demands from Washington. This is not a list of requests. It's a stress test of whether the United States is willing to rewrite the rules of a decades-long strategic confrontation. First on the table, full sanctions relief, the very tool that has constrained Iran for years. Next, unrestricted oil exports, the lifeblood of Iran's economy, capable of triggering an immediate economic rebound. But the real flashpoint lies in the nuclear file. Tehran rejects zero enrichment. It seeks recognition of a non-weapons nuclear program. That is the red line, the point where strategic trust is tested. Beyond that, Iran calls for lifting UN Security Council sanctions and reintegration into global supply chains as a full participant. If realized, Iran wouldn't just survive, it would re-enter the system with restored weight. On the security front, Tehran floats a permanent non-aggression pact with the United States. But beneath that lies a broader ask: deeper U.S. involvement in a regional security architecture, support for a multinational enrichment consortium, and even funding for reconstruction and civilian compensation inside Iran. It goes further, still pressing for the removal of terrorism-related designations, a demand carrying significant political and symbolic weight. In parallel, Tehran outlines a comprehensive thaw roadmap, restoring diplomatic and consular channels, lifting travel restrictions, and expanding cooperation across key sectors such as trade, energy, and technology. This goes beyond de-escalation. It is an attempt to rebuild the bilateral relationship from the ground up. Notably, the package avoids maximalism. It is neither Iran's most hardline position nor Washington's strictest set of demands. Instead, it represents a fragile equilibrium, open enough to enable dialogue, yet complex enough to turn every decision into a strategic gamble. The most contentious issue remains uranium enrichment, the core of decades-long tensions. Iran insists on retaining enrichment as a matter of sovereignty and strategic capability, while the United States continues to demand its complete cessation over concerns of rapid weaponization potential. The fragile balance lies in an alternative pathway. Iran could maintain a civilian nuclear energy program by importing uranium from external suppliers, a model used by many countries. But this is less a technical issue than one of strategic trust. That deficit has repeatedly turned the nuclear file into the Achilles heel of past negotiations. Beyond the nuclear issue, the proposal exposes critical gaps. Iran's ballistic missile program, one of Washington's primary concerns, is notably absent. The U.S. has not always demanded full dismantlement, but it has consistently pushed for clear limitations to ensure a strictly defensive posture. Omitting this element leaves the security framework structurally incomplete. Another sensitive blind spot is Iran's network of regional proxies, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis groups. Tehran is widely accused of backing and a key driver of broader Middle East instability. Yet the current framework remains largely silent on this front. A strategic silence, but one that carries significant risk. Similar gaps proved fatal in the 2015 nuclear deal, which addressed only part of the nuclear issue while leaving ballistic missiles and proxy networks untouched. That incompleteness was a key reason President Donald Trump withdrew, arguing the framework could not ensure long-term stability. Another unresolved issue is the Strait of Hormuz, the artery of global energy flows. Iran has hinted at imposing transit fees, a move that could disrupt both the global economy and maritime norms. In practice, such a scenario is highly unlikely. If states begin charging for passage through controlled waterways, it would set a destabilizing precedent, potentially prompting similar actions at other choke points controlled by countries like Spain, the UK, or Denmark. And that is a scenario no major economy wants. As a result, the likelihood of Iran actually imposing transit fees is low. But that doesn't make the proposal irrelevant. It can serve as leverage, a bargaining chip to extract concessions at the negotiating table. This is especially notable as Tehran simultaneously signals it will not disrupt maritime flows through the Strait of Hormuz. In parallel, Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif underscored this posture in a foreign affairs piece, arguing Iran is not in a position of outright defeat, while warning of the costs of continued escalation. The message reflects a stark reality. Iran may endure, but prolonged conflict will further erode infrastructure and inflict heavy civilian losses. In that context, a ceasefire push is not just tactical. It is an attempt to contain the rising cost of a conflict where all sides are paying an increasingly high price. The ceasefire proposal is more than a diplomatic gesture. It's an attempt to create an off-ramp amid mounting pressure on all sides, forcing both parties to reassess before the situation slips out of control. Inside Iran, however, the picture is far less cohesive. Despite backing from a figure close to the center of power, the plan faces slim chances of approval. The core obstacle is strong opposition from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's hard power backbone, which has not only rejected the proposal but publicly criticized it, even calling for punitive measures against its proponent. Threatening rhetoric is beginning to surface, underscoring deepening internal divisions. Notably, this pushback extends beyond political statements and protests into state media, where programs are openly dismissing the idea of de-escalation. This suggests that a significant faction within Iran's power structure is unwilling to accept any form of de-escalation. Yet the paradox remains. Despite fierce internal opposition, negotiation channels are still open. President Donald Trump recently confirmed that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are engaged in ongoing exchanges with Tehran. It underscores a complex reality. While one bloc pushes for continued confrontation, another is quietly seeking an exit through diplomacy. The situation had appeared to move closer to a potential breakthrough, with the prospect of direct talks emerging. But at a critical juncture, Iran requested more time, stalling the process. Washington responded almost immediately with a calibrated strike, reportedly targeting the B-1 bridge from the U.S. Perspective, this was not just a military action, but a clear signal that delays would come at a cost. Trump reinforced this posture in comments to Axios, maintaining a hardline stance. The situation escalated further after a confrontational post on Truth Social, warning of imminent strikes and demanding movement on the Strait of Hormuz language that points to a potential expansion of targets, with direct implications for infrastructure and civilian impact. More notable is the message's focus. The demand to open the Strait of Hormuz comes with no reference to a nuclear deal, ceasefire, or peace framework. The sole priority is safeguarding maritime flow, indicating Washington is placing strategic interests in Hormuz above all else, effectively making it the center of the confrontation. A key detail has also emerged. Back-channel negotiations are not only active, but operating under special rules. President Donald Trump confirmed that Iranian negotiators have been granted deconfliction status, meaning they are not targeted by airstrikes as long as talks continue. This suggests both sides are intent on keeping communication lines open despite escalating tensions on the ground. Trump has also indicated that Iran has largely stepped back from nuclear weapons negotiations, implying significant concessions may already be in play. From Washington's perspective, many core points have been addressed. However, a closer look complicates that narrative. Iran has long maintained it does not pursue nuclear weapons, but the gap lies between declaration and capability. Enrichment levels reportedly reaching up to 70%, alongside an expanding ballistic missile program, continue to raise concerns that the program could exceed purely civilian intent. Prior to the conflict, Iran's strategy appeared relatively clear: build a missile capability strong enough to deter adversaries, then move closer to a nuclear threshold by increasing uranium enrichment. In that context, repeated claims of not pursuing nuclear weapons began to lose strategic credibility. In a separate development, President Donald Trump disclosed details about protests in Iran in January. According to his account, large-scale demonstrations erupted, with millions demanding change, prompting a forceful response from authorities and significant casualties. More notably, Trump claimed Washington attempted to support protest groups by transferring weapons. The effort, however, reportedly fell short. Shipments routed through Kurdish channels likely never reached their intended recipients. Taken together, these elements point to a complex picture. While signs of concession appear at the negotiating table, parallel efforts to shape Iran's internal dynamics continue behind the scenes. More than a month after the launch of Operation Epic Fury, the battlefield has entered a new phase, highlighted by a bold U.S. rescue operation. A downed F-15 pilot deep inside Iranian territory was recovered after President Donald Trump authorized a large-scale special operations incursion. Beyond a tactical success, the mission signaled Washington's capacity for rapid, precise intervention. However, the center of gravity has shifted to the Strait of Hormuz, a strategic choke point now under global scrutiny. As risks to maritime flow grow, multiple nations are considering involvement to keep trade routes open. Ukraine has notably offered to assist the U.S., leveraging years of combat experience against systems like Shahed drones and FPV UAVs. Its air defense adaptations are among the most effective in active conflict zones. Kyiv's position is clear. No single actor can resolve this. Drawing from Black Sea operations, where wartime blockades required coordinated, mediated solutions, Ukraine frames Hormuz as a multinational challenge. The implication is direct. This is no longer a bilateral crisis, but a collective security issue, one that could reshape regional strategic balance depending on how coordination unfolds. Because the issue extends beyond Ukraine and Russia, it affects food supply chains across entire continents. The current situation is comparable, but where Ukraine faced an agricultural crisis, Hormuz is about energy. From Kyiv's perspective, warfighting and energy negotiations can run in parallel. They don't have to be linked. In the Black Sea, Russia repeatedly disrupted maritime corridors, first monthly, then weekly, and eventually almost daily. Ukraine ultimately stepped away from negotiations and moved to secure the corridor independently. That required layered defenses, interception systems, military escorts, and electronic warfare capabilities deployed on commercial vessels. Kyiv frames this as a scalable model and signals readiness to assist. However, it is not directly involved in Hormuz. At this stage, no formal request has been made. For now, Ukraine is offering its experience as a tested operational blueprint rather than a direct intervention. Ukraine emphasizes that securing a strategic corridor cannot rely on diplomacy alone. It requires a combination of military force, interception technology, and electronic warfare. At the same time, the United Arab Emirates has signaled readiness to engage, making its position clear. The Strait of Hormuz cannot be held hostage by any single state. As the U.S. increases naval deployments, the UAE stands prepared to coordinate in ensuring maritime security. The parallel emergence of Ukraine and the UAE in this equation highlights a broader trend. More actors are entering the arena, expanding pressure on Iran into a layered, multinational front. Against this backdrop, the coming week could prove decisive as signals translate into concrete actions. With multiple forces converging on a choke point like Hormuz, the risk of escalation rises exponentially. We'll pause here. What's your assessment of how this situation unfolds?